Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are nestled deep in the permafrost inside a shelter shaped more by wind and memory than by stone. It creaks a little when the temperature drops, though that's not just the walls. The mammoth bones outside. Yeah, they whisper. They don't creak, they whisper. Some say it's the shifting ice, others say it's just your imagination doing gymnastics after dark. But I'm telling you now, if you lie very still, very quiet with your breath fogging only slightly, you'll hear them too. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along this edge of the shelter, your boots barely crunching in the powder. It's colder than expected, the kind of cold that feels like you're walking into the breath of something older than sleep. You bend low near the bones' mammoth ribs, splayed like the ribs of a long-dead cathedral half buried in snow. One curls up like a hand that forgot what it was holding. Another rests flat, frosted over, and humming quietly under your fingertips. You didn't expect them to be warm. They are. You look up. The wind moves in lazy circles, but something else pulses beneath it. A tremble, maybe. A wordless sound. Your breath feels loud in comparison, like a child trying to interrupt a funeral. The oldest rib, the thickest and most yellowed, sits farther out, half claimed by moss and lichen. And when the air drops another degree, that's the one that begins to shift. Not violently, just a twitch, like a shoulder blade remembering winter. A crackle of ice, the pop of expanding marrow, and then, wah-ha! It's not a voice, but it is vocal, deep, blunted. If a glacier could yawn, this would be it. You back up, not because you're scared, more because your mind's now juggling the probability that mammoth bones just made a sentence. The elders of the camp say this only happens at temperatures colder than -20. The bones tell stories when they think you're too cold to run. One of them grinned mid-toothless. And of course, you laughed. Then, before you knew the story had a temperature threshold, you crouch again, this time staying still longer. The whispering doesn't repeat in words, but rhythm. One bone quivers, another stays silent. Then a hum. The same way wind through a cracked window can sometimes sound like a forgotten lullaby. You close your eyes, not to sleep. God, no, but to listen differently. You try to use the skin on your face, the bones in your own skull, to feel whatever's vibrating through the ice. Here's a historical fact to keep you grounded. Mammoth bones have been found in Siberia, arranged in circular patterns, likely by ancient humans building shelters out of tusks and femurs. Functional architecture, but some rings. No signs of human cuts. No ash, no tool marks, just a perfect circle made of bones too heavy to move casually. Historians still debate whether the mammoth somehow died in a spiral or if their herds had burial rituals we've never quite understood. You touch one vertebra the size of a bike helmet and wonder how many stories could be compressed into this silent spiral. 5,000? You think of your own spine, and how little it's asked of you today besides not collapsing during your 7th cup of instant coffee. A joke pops into your head. How many mammoth bones does it take to build a whispering igloo? No punchline forms. The bones don't laugh. They just wait. And here's something odd. The whispering doesn't start from the ground. It moves downward like something on the surface of the bones triggers it. Frost forms differently across each one. One condenses like a breath, another sweats just slightly under the cold. You swear one rib has condensation running upward. That's not how physics works, right? Maybe the laws of thermodynamics call in sick here. Another creak. A different rib this time. It angles not toward you but toward the open ice shelf. A suggestion, or maybe an accusation. You hear an actual sentence, then whispered too fast to record, too slow to forget. You don't remember the words, but the feeling stays. Something like, she waited in the cold so the others would keep walking. Your fingers twitch. You didn't say that. You didn't think it either. You look over your shoulder to make sure no one's creeping up with a parka and a prank. But nope, just you. Just the wind. Just a pile of unquiet bones with better storytelling instincts than most documentaries. You take a few steps back toward the center. Whatever story the bones are telling, it's not in English. But it's not in English either. It's older than grammar, newer than silence. You lean into it. Try humming. One long note. Nothing happens. You change pitch. Still nothing. But on the third note, a mid-range hum with a minor dip near the end, two bones shift, like a pair of teeth about to close. You don't hum again. The shelter feels smaller now, like the bones have leaned in around you. And you realize this isn't a story being told. It's a story being waited for to be finished, filled in, sung back. They're not whispering because they remember. They're whispering because they hope you do. The next morning, you wake up to a sky that forgot what color is. It's not gray, not blue, just a kind of washed-out bone. Fitting, you think. You sip something warm and bitter, probably coffee, though it could be melted snow and roasted regret. The wind's calmer today, but the bones haven't stopped humming, just changed key. You step outside, trying not to look like you're doing what you're obviously doing. Returning to the mammoth ribs as if they're old friends who might finish the conversation they started last night. You're not superstitious, you're just respectfully curious, like a cat with a PhD. The largest rib, the one that cracked audibly in the dark, now points in a different direction, not wildly, just maybe 5 degrees to the left. And the thing is, it's aligned, perfectly, with a shallow depression in the snow about 50 paces out. Nothing dramatic, just a dip in the land you could have missed if you blinked or if you had a functioning adult attention span. You follow it anyway. The snow crunches louder here, like the ice beneath it is thinner or more hollow. You glance around, no trees, no obvious landmarks. But the wind dies entirely once you're inside the depression. A bowl of stillness. You kneel, brushing your glove across the ice. Beneath the powder is something darker. Mud. No, something bone-colored. You dig gently with your fingertips like you're trying not to wake something. There it is. A ridge, then another. Not a skeleton exactly, but not one either. More like the absence of something. A body-shaped vacancy in the frozen earth. Wide, ovular, the size of a kitchen table. Nest-like. You sit back on your heels and frown. What dies without leaving a body but still leaves a shape? An authoritative fact to chew on in Pleistocene-era sites across Eurasia. Archaeologists have found mammoth nurseries, shallow depressions lined with vegetation bones, and in rare cases, frozen traces of milk proteins. Some suggest mammoths laid their young in snow bowls, insulated by their own fur and warmth. Others argue these are just coincidental shapes. Historians still debate whether mammoths had designated birthing grounds, or if we're just seeing patterns in random permafrost dimples. Humans do love a tidy mystery, but this doesn't feel random. The rib back at the circle pointed here. You glance back, barely seeing the bone ring on the rise, but you know that's where it started. You're standing in whatever the bones were remembering. The depression isn't just low, it's hollowed. You walk its rim once, twice. It's not perfectly circular, but it's not organic either. The edges feel deliberate. You half expect to find a tag labeled "Property of the Pleistocene." And in the center, there's one flat stone. You blink. It doesn't match the surrounding geology. It's smoother, lighter, like a plaque. You kneel again and touch it. The cold goes straight through your glove into your palm and settles in your wrist like an accusation. Then you notice it. Tiny etchings. Not writing. Not even scratches, really. More like scuff marks that only show up when the light hits at a very specific angle. You tilt your head. The etchings form a spiral. Loosely. Imperfectly. Like the memory of a pattern more than the pattern itself. If you were desperate, you might call it a symbol. If you were a conspiracy theorist, you'd call it a mammoth mandala. If you're just you call it weird and keep staring. Here's an odd fact to pair with your numb fingers. Mammoths had 6 sets of molars in their lifetime, replacing them as they wore down from grinding rough vegetation. When the 6th set wore out, the mammoth starved. Their death wasn't dramatic, it was dental. Imagine dying because your mouth just gave up. Honestly relatable. You lie down beside the stone. Just for a second. Just to feel if the shape of your body fits the shape of the depression. You sink a little. The snow is thinner here, crusted with crystals, but not solid, like the earth was packed and then exhaled. You let your body relax and feel something shift, something not outside you but below. You sit up fast, no noise, no movement. But the flat stone has a thin line of frost now running along its spiral. You didn't see that before. The frost keeps curling. Not fast, not dramatically, just slowly drawing the spiral inward, like a turntable playing ice music. You want to laugh? You almost do. But something in your neck hairs vetoes it. You look back toward the shelter. The bones haven't moved again, but the rib is still pointing. You squint at the depression's edge, at the way the wind refuses to enter it, at the way it feels both safe and deliberately unsafe, like a soft trap set by a very polite ghost. One more thing, there are no footprints here. Not animal, not human, not mammoth, and that might be the scariest part. You whisper something to yourself, maybe a joke, probably something like, "I really should have brought a dog." No laughter answers you, just the sound of the wind finally deciding it's bored and moving on. You rise, brushing snow off your knees. You take one step outside the depression and look back. The spiral's gone. The stone is just a stone. And suddenly the dip doesn't look so deliberate. Maybe it never was. Maybe your eyes invented the shape. Maybe the bones are just bones. But when you return to the rib circle, that oldest rib has turned again, a few degrees more. Still pointing, but now it aims farther out. It's not done telling the story. And apparently, neither are you. You don't say anything out loud when you notice it. You just let the new angle of the rib sink in. Let your breath frost over a little longer in the windless air, because now it's unmistakable. The bone is pointing to the east, and just barely visible through the curtain of gently falling snow is a single crooked tree, alone, half dead, lichen creeping up one side like slow fire. Not native to this tundra, not anymore. You're already walking toward it before you've even decided to. The land rises slightly. Not a hill exactly, more like a pause in the ground's collapse. As you approach, the wind picks up again, but only behind you. Ahead near the tree, the air feels warm and wrong, like breath from a mouth too wide. You stop just before the trunk and stare down. The ground is worn, not in the way of wind erosion or animal tracks, but circular, a perfect path scored around the tree over and over again. Maybe a meter wide, pressed smooth by something large and steady. Over years, decades, centuries, you step into the circle and follow the groove. It loops the trunk like a ritual. You don't trip. Your footfalls naturally match the curvature. And the moment you complete the first loop, you feel it in your legs, like muscle memory. Or more unnervingly, species memory. They circled trees before sleep. That's what the old woman in the village said once, right before falling asleep herself mid-sentence. Mammoths, they liked the trees, she mumbled. They'd wear rings around them, tucked in the babies, then they'd sleep standing up, facing outward. She'd laughed at her own story, one gummy cackle that sounded like a crumpled paper bag. You'd written it off as folklore. Sweet silly. But now your boots are in the groove. Here's a historical fact that will ice your spine. Concentric ring depressions have been found in Pleistocene soils, especially in areas where lone ancient trees once grew. Some show subtle repeated compression marks, almost circular, and fossilized dung patterns matching herd behavior. Some scientists propose that mammoths moved in spirals to protect their calves. Others think it's coincidence. Historians still debate whether these sleeping circles were instinctive defenses, territorial markings, or just the ancient version of walking around the block to calm the kids down. You crouch and run your hand over the packed earth. Even under the snow, you can feel how compacted it is, like stone but made of motion. You follow the path again, once, twice, a third time. Then you stop, not from exhaustion, from interruption. There just outside the ring is a shallow hole, not dug by shovels, smoothed by pressure, maybe by something laying down repeatedly. You lean over it, scoop out some snow. In the hollow pine needles, ancient, fossilized, but arranged, like bedding. And there buried under one side a small curved shard of something yellow-brown. You pick it up. It's a tusk sliver, smooth on one side, jagged on the other. It has scrape marks, fine and deliberate, maybe where something small once gnawed, or where something big tried to shave it down. You turn it in your fingers. It fits too well. Like a coin, like a puzzle piece, like something that was meant to be carried. Suddenly you imagine this scene alive. The tree full of leaves may be a bit stunted, yes, but shaded and humming with insects. A herd of mammoths spiraling around it in silence. The oldest walking the perimeter. The youngest curled beneath the boughs on moss bedding and broken pine needles. Their warm bodies steaming against the cold, creating their own small weather system. You blink. It's too clear. That memory doesn't belong to you. You shake your head and almost say out loud, "Not mine." But the wind answers first. It howls once, not loudly but with purpose, like a breath held too long and finally let go. You drop the tusk shard into your coat pocket without really deciding to. Feels safer with you now. Or maybe you just don't want to leave it for someone else to misinterpret. Again, here's your weird fact for the evening: mammoth dung has been preserved in permafrost for thousands of years. Some samples even contain intact grass seeds and insect remains. One such deposit revealed the dietary shifts of a herd right before an extinction event. Yes, scientists literally studied ancient poop to figure out climate change. Humanity nothing if not thorough. You sit under the tree right in the circle path. You lean your head back and look up through the mostly bare branches. The sky above it feels closer, not in a romantic way, more like the ceiling in a low hotel room, fine, until you try to stand up. The silence returns, and with it a faint rhythmic thudding. Not real sound, just the echo of imagined steps. You close your eyes. For a second you feel the vibration in the earth. 4, 5, 6 creatures walking around you. Broad feet, heavy breath, their warmth brushing your arms like steam. You open your eyes again. Nothing. Except now there's a soft hollow in the circle where you didn't see one before. A print. One large 3-toed impression. Pressed fresh and facing inward. Not away. You rise slowly, your knees cracking like the first breaking ice of spring. You don't walk the circle again. You step out, back toward the rib ring, leaving the tree and the spiral behind. When you return, the rib is moved again. This time it's not pointing at the tree. It's angled farther still, southward, into the denser, colder part of the steppe. It's starting to feel less like a compass and more like a spinal reflex. The bones aren't guiding you randomly. They're remembering forward. You don't eat much before setting off. Just chew something dry and oat-like while squinting at the rib's new orientation. Southward now, steeper terrain. The wind returns with a bit more attitude this morning, trying to lift your hood off like a parent fed up with your fashion choices. The bone ring behind you gives off no sound. It just watches. The land stretches out in icy waves. The kind of terrain that looks flat until you start walking across it and realize you've been climbing for an hour. You're sweating under the coat, but your nose feels like a frozen raisin. The trail leads you to the base of a low ridge lined with shale and the crushed memories of a glacier that once had big ambitions. And then you smell it. Not rot, not sulfur, not the usual Arctic mystery funk. This is something softer, cleaner, almost floral, but not the pretty kind. The kind that makes you think of meltwater rushing under snow and something growing where it really shouldn't. You climb, hands to rock feet scrambling a bit on the frost-worn stones. At the top, the smell hits again, and they're nestled in the shallow basin protected on all sides by fractured stone walls, is something impossible. A fossil, massive, elegant. But this one isn't a skeleton laid bare. It's a shadowed outline buried in mineral soil and covered in frost. A gentle bulge in the terrain that looks like a sleeping beast halfway through a snow nap. Just the faint curve of a back. The tips of what might be ribs. One tusk long and arched, sticking out from the slope like a forgotten question mark. You sit beside it. Carefully, like you're afraid of waking it. There's a hush here. A kind of reverent quiet that doesn't happen naturally anymore. It feels like you're standing inside someone's memory uninvited. You take off a glove, press your palm against the tusk. Warm. Because of the sun, you tell yourself. Because of the way stone holds heat. Definitely not because ancient ivory remembers how to be alive. Here's a historical fact to frost your thoughts. Mammoth tusks contain growth rings just like trees. Each ring can reveal stress. Climate change's seasonal food availability. Even pregnancy. You can literally read a mammoth's life like a biography etched year by year into the spiral of its tusk. Historians still debate whether tusk growth changed drastically before extinction, or whether our sample size is just full of the particularly unlucky. You stroke the spiral gently as if it might answer back. It doesn't. But something else does. The wind changes again. This time it brings scent soft and fading. Snowmelt. Not actual melting snow, no. It's a smell. A ghost of it. The aroma of minerals, wet bark, thawing moss, and something deeper musk, earth, and fur warmed by sunlight filtered through leafless trees. It smells like a matriarch. You don't know how you know that, you just do. The fossil beneath you isn't just a body. It's a mother, a leader. She once guided dozens of mammoths across this steppe back and forth with the seasons. Her tusks carved wind maps into the landscape. Her feet read the slope of glaciers like a blind woman reads Braille. You lie down beside the ridge where her spine would have been. Not out of drama, just instinct, like you're trying to align your vertebrae with hers. Maybe catch the same wind current. Maybe remember the same thing. Your odd fact for the day: the scent of snowmelt can trigger something called petrichor anticipation in some mammals. That's not a real scientific term. Yet. But researchers have noticed that elephants and possibly mammoths before them react to the smell of approaching rain and thaw in measurable behavioral ways. It's like their nose remembers tomorrow before it happens. You inhale again. The scent fades slightly. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's the ghost moving on. But then you spot something just beside her tusk, a stone. Not native, small, obsidian numbed smoother, sharpened at one end. A tool. You pick it up, not cautiously but reverently. It fits in your palm heavy and sure, like it was carved to answer only one question. You inspect it closely. There are scratches on the broad side, lines. Almost like symbols, but not symmetrical, not meant to be read, just kept, etched for memory or grief. You glance back at the fossil bulge. She didn't die alone. Someone left this. Someone tried to remember her deliberately. That's the thing that sticks. Mammoths were mourned. Not just eaten, not just painted, mourned, and not always by us. Because here's where it gets weird next to the tool pressed into the ice, 3 wide depressions. Footprints, massive, mammoth-sized, but facing inward, as if one of her kind returned. And stood watch, and maybe, just maybe, carve those scratches with the same tusk you're touching now. Historians don't agree. Some think mammoths revisited the remains of their dead. Others argue that's projection. Wishful thinking. But even the skeptics go quiet when they see tusks with markings that match each other across miles, across years. You place the tool back where you found it. The matriarch has enough stories carved into her already. You stand, stretch your back, dust snow off your shoulders, and glance back down the ridge. The rib circle's barely visible now. But even from here you can tell, the oldest rib. It's moved again. This time you don't hesitate. You don't stop for a snack or to argue with the wind or to wonder whether your boots are meant for terrain shaped like regret. You just walk. The rib had pointed just east of south now, toward a lumpy, sloping section of steppe veiled in that special kind of fog that doesn't roll or swirl but waits, like it's holding its breath for your arrival. You step through it, the frost catching in your eyelashes, and find yourself on a shallow plateau littered with stones, shaped like eggs someone gave up on carving. And then just beyond them a sound, delicate, repetitive, a bird. You freeze. That shouldn't be possible. The sound isn't melodic, it's a two-note call, high then low, a dissonant ping-pa. It repeats, always in pairs. You scan the low shrubs and see nothing. You crouch. The sound echoes again, then again. The air feels heavier around it as if the noise has weight. You remember reading something in a blurred-out article that smelled like coffee and unpaid grants? During the late Ice Age, small prehistoric birds with oversized throat sacs made unique calls across the tundra. One of them, a species now long extinct, nested deep inside snowbanks and used acoustic bursts to stun insects. But here's where it gets strange. Its call was loud enough to disturb migrating herds. Mammoths would alter their entire route to avoid those frequencies. Historians still debate whether the birds were consciously warning the herds away or if it was a lucky survival glitch of sound. The call rings again. Ping-pa. You trace the sound's location to a cluster of wind-blasted shrubs clinging to an ancient gully. You step closer, crunching dry grass underfoot, and then you see it. Not the bird, those are gone, but the nest. Or what remains of one. A depression in the ground, circular and shallow, lined with scraps of fur. Too soft to be human-made. Too recent-looking to be ancient, but here's the catch: when you touch the fur, it crumbles into powder. Just like that. Ashes in disguise. Beside the nest lies a stone dark and rounded with a notch that hums when you blow across it. You don't know why you blow across it, but you do. And for a split second, the sound returns. Not just the ping-poo of the ghost bird, but a reply. Low, dull, like a mammoth foot pressing down. You drop the stone. It rolls slightly, then stops cradled in a groove. You back up a step, maybe two. The nest is definitely fossilized. Its lining fur feathers, bits of moss has fused with the soil. And around it, like petals, are hoof-sized depressions, circular, radiating outward, like a ripple. No claw marks. No trampling, just large, wide feet that surrounded the nest in a careful pattern. You imagine it because you have to. The herd. Stopping, forming a circle. Not to attack, not to graze, just to wait. Maybe they didn't fear the sound. Maybe they obeyed it. You shake your head. Obeying a bird. Too much, too ridiculous. But then again, here's an odd fact. Modern elephants communicate using infrasound frequencies below human hearing. They can sense seismic vibrations through their feet, detect distant thunder, and navigate with what researchers call tactile listening. It's like having ears in their toes. So maybe mammoths did too. Maybe they didn't hear the songbird. Maybe they felt it. And if a bird's call could signal unstable ice or predator presence, or volcanic gases escaping frozen ground, then maybe circling around the nest wasn't obedience. Maybe it was survival. You sit for a moment in the snow, elbows on knees, feeling ridiculous and reverent all at once. This place isn't haunted in the Hollywood sense. It's haunted in the organizational sense. Like something once lived here, set up rules, and everyone else, mammal, bird, ghost, archaeologist, has to follow them out of politeness. You pick up one of the petrified twigs near the nest. On the underside is a tiny indentation, claw-shaped. Not a predator, a fledgling probably. Something that once curled here before snow swallowed it whole. You glance up. That's when you notice the path ahead, barely perceptible. A gentle groove in the snow and moss, a line leading away from the nest. Not animal, not human, just gravitational, the landscape sagging slightly as if something heavy once passed through and the ground never forgot. You follow it, not because you have to, because you already did. A callback thrums in your chest. Remember when the bones whispered? Remember how they weren't telling you something, they were asking you to remember? Well, you're remembering, and the memory's dragging you forward. One more thing, your left foot steps into something oddly warm. You jerk it back. It's a patch of thawed soil, small, moist, steaming just slightly in the cold air. You touch it with your glove. Smell it. Herbs. You swear on your last functioning brain cell it smells like crushed sedge. Earthy. Medicinal. Like what elephants in zoos sometimes rub into their wounds. The scent is faint, but it's there. It fades quickly, too quickly. But you know what you smelled. The wind moves again. You glance back at the nest. The sound is gone. The groove continues forward. The rib, when you eventually return to the shelter, has turned again. Of course it has. You know where to go now. Before even looking. Still, you check the rib circle out of courtesy. And yep, there it is. The oldest rib angled slightly west this time, pointing like a stubborn finger to the horizon. It doesn't shiver in the cold anymore, doesn't creak. It just aims. You follow. The terrain levels out as you walk the sky heavy with late-day indifference. Somewhere behind the clouds, the sun is trying to remember its job. You trudge across snowdrifts that whisper with every step, and after maybe an hour, the land changes. Less snow, more stone. A dry patch, wind-scoured and pitted with craters that look almost deliberate. And there in the middle, two tusks. Not full ones. Fragments. Curved ivory remnants that jut from the earth like the ribs of something long buried. You approach expecting just more weathered bone. But as you get closer, you stop mid-step. Because one of them is marked. Not chipped, not worn, scratched. Long diagonal lines run across its curve. Some shallow, some deep. Parallel but unevenly spaced. You drop to your knees, brushing ice off the surface, and trace the marks with your fingertips. They're not random. They aren't the desperate gouges of scavengers or the clumsy carvings of early humans trying to turn bone into tools. They're careful, almost tender, as if someone or something had run their own tusk along the ivory like a farewell. A historical fact for your shivering brain: mammoths used their tusks for more than defense. They dug through snow-stripped bark, nudged calves, and sometimes even sparred gently during mating rituals. Fossil tusks often show wear patterns from repeated behavior, but occasionally they show single, deep scratches, as if another tusk had dragged slowly across them. Some scientists say it's just tusk-to-tusk combat. Others, they're not so sure. Historians still debate whether some marks are from grief, not violence. You sit there a while, wind numbing your cheeks, just staring at that curve. Then you notice something else. On the opposite tusk fragment, almost symmetrical, there's a much smaller scratch, just one, clean, shallow, and it loops slightly. A spiral. Not decorative, not fancy, just a motion, carved once, possibly absent-mindedly, or with deep, dangerous intention. You look up. The tusks aren't laid flat. They're angled inward toward each other, forming a shape that feels heavy with meaning. You step into the space between them and immediately feel it await. Not physical, emotional, like walking into the memory of a conversation you weren't invited to but desperately needed to hear. Your boot nudges something small. You kneel again and brush away the snow. A shard of bone, flat, hand-sized, maybe from a mammoth's jaw or scapula, and on its surface more marks. 3 lines, 2 vertical, 1 slanted through them. You blink. It's not a language. It's a gesture, like someone trying to explain loss in the simplest possible terms. Here's your odd fact: some ancient Inuit groups believed mammoths weren't animals at all, but creatures that lived underground and emerged only when they drowned. Their bones were thought to carry messages from the other side. Not in words, but in pressure, in weight, in the way your body feels heavier after holding one. You don't know why that's the thing that comes to mind now, but it fits. You press your palm against the carved bone. You don't expect anything, but you feel a shiver in your shoulder anyway. Not cold, not fear, recognition, like your bones understood before your brain did. The sky starts to shift, a slow amber glow sliding under the clouds like a shy child slipping into the back of the classroom. You glance around and realize you're standing in another circle. Not perfect, but clear. A space surrounded by fragments arranged with intention. Some rib bones here, a partial femur there, all facing inward. Not buried, not hunted, placed. You whisper something you didn't know was in your mouth. This wasn't a kill site, this was a memory. The tusks don't answer, but the wind stills. The shadows grow longer. And the rib back at the shelter, it's already pointing elsewhere. Of course it is. You don't go back to the shelter this time, you just watch the horizon and guess where the rib's pointing now. Your feet already know anyway. The wind's pushing from behind like it agrees, so you follow the unseen gesture through a narrowing pass between two hills where the snow deepens again and everything turns unnaturally quiet. No birds, no wind, just the soft whump of your steps. And then you see it. The ring, not of bones this time, it's subtle. Depressions in the snow arranged in a slow, deliberate spiral, wide enough for mammoths, deep enough that snow's collected differently in the center. Like a starfish melted into the tundra, you walk the perimeter, the pattern holds. A spiral. One entrance point, no obvious exit. In the very center, a dark patch. You approach slowly, half expecting the snow to whisper again. But it doesn't. It just waits. You crouch and clear a space with your glove. Beneath the frost is compacted earth. Pressed so flat it could have been ironed by time. And resting there, half buried in the frozen soil, is something small. Curved, pale, a baby tusk, miniature compared to the others. Softly curled, the size of your forearm. You don't touch it at first, just sit beside it and let your breath rise and disappear. Here's your historical fact. Juvenile mammoths didn't grow their first tusks until about 6 months old, and they replaced them multiple times in early life like baby teeth. But unlike teeth tusks, record environmental trauma. In one case, researchers traced a juvenile's famine through the disruptions in its tusk rings. It died young. Probably starving. Its bones were found surrounded by adult tracks, which is what you notice next. You stand slowly. Around the spiral, the faint print patterns become clearer. Big ones. Dozens. Pressed gently, evenly spaced like a rotating wheel of protection. You walk the spiral inward, following the curve. There are no signs of panic, no trampled snow, no scattered bones, just a cold, quiet sadness tucked into geometry. They slept in spirals when danger was near. You remember that now. The elders of the herd circled the outside. The young ones curled at the center, insulated not just by warmth but by rhythm. Predators would pause at the outer edge, confused maybe, threatened, or simply unwilling to cut through that unblinking circle of silent, massive bodies. Spirals are hard to predict. That's the trick. Even humans find them disturbing when drawn wrong. Your odd fact for the night: in early medieval Europe, some monasteries were built with spiral cloisters not for defense, but for meditation. The walk itself was thought to confuse demons, as if evil couldn't keep its footing when faced with curved logic. You complete the spiral and sit again beside the baby tusk. It's smooth on one side. Worn, not carved, just used. As if the calf pressed its face into it while sleeping, or while being comforted, or while dying. You breathe through your nose, try to blink back whatever your tear ducts are threatening. It's too cold for crying anyway. They'd freeze mid-drop and land like punctuation marks on the snow. There's no trauma here, no tooth marks, no broken bones, just stillness. A calf that didn't wake up, and a herd that stayed long enough to remember. You glance upward. The spiral's outer edge is barely visible from this low angle, but you know it's there. The adults didn't flee. They circled, protected, and then left slowly like walking backward from an altar. You lie down beside the small tusk, just for a moment. The snow is cold, yes, but There's something else beneath it. Heat, maybe, or pressure, or time. You close your eyes and feel it, the ghost of breath, not yours. Big, rhythmic, mammoth breath. You don't know if it's memory or imagination. You don't ask, because suddenly you realize something new. The bones aren't just telling a story. They're telling this story, and you've just entered the middle of it. You sit up slowly, brushing snow off your side. The baby tusk glows faintly in the dying light. You don't take it with you. That would feel like stealing someone else's lullaby. You retrace the spiral outward. At the edge, you glance back. The shadows have lengthened across the pattern, turning the spiral into something alive. A fingerprint, a fossil, a warning. You inhale deeply and whisper, "I remember." It's not clear if the wind answers, but far behind you at the shelter, the rib creaks. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake up colder than usual. Not frostbite cold, just deeply convincingly still. Like your bones have joined the story while you weren't paying attention. The rib outside hasn't moved. It leans now, not pointing, just waiting. Like it knows what comes next and doesn't need to nudge you anymore. So you follow nothing. No new direction, no signal, just a hunch. You walk east toward the lowlands where snow gathers in hush pools and the sky sinks closer to the earth. After a while, the wind fades. Then the world fades. Then sound itself starts feeling optional. And then you see it. Half buried in the powder, almost invisible unless you were looking for sorrow specifically, is the shape of a juvenile skeleton. You stop. You were told there were no remains here, that all the fossil finds were deeper in the valley. But here it is. Small ribs, a narrow spine, curled legs like a child mid-nap. No scavenger damage, no trauma, just stillness. You kneel and brush snow away from the face. The skull is tilted slightly as if it fell asleep, watching something comforting. A baby fell into sleep too early, and no one woke it. The bones are soft-edged with time, but something about them holds a weight no storm can erase. You reach out, place a gloved hand near the spine. You don't touch, not exactly. You hover, like asking permission from a memory. Here's your authoritative fact: in Siberia, near the Yamal Peninsula, the remains of juvenile mammoths have been found with astonishing preservation. One specimen, named Lyuba, was so intact that her last meal was still in her stomach and her skin bore signs of bacterial biofilm. Cause of death: suffocation in mud. No violence, just misstep and stillness. Historians still debate whether her herd tried to free her or waited nearby in mourning. You sit there for a while. The bones don't move, don't hum. They just rest. Around the tiny frame, the ground is unusually flat. Not trampled, not hollow, just honored. Like no one stepped too close. Not after, not for a long while. You walk a slow ring around the body. 12 prints. Wide, deep, faint. Adult mammoth tracks. Not leaving, staying. The ring forms a loose circle. Not tight, just enough for standing. Facing inward, you swallow. They stood with her. Maybe for an hour, maybe all night, maybe long enough for snow to cover the future. You step back, turn away. That's when you notice something stranger. A stone, not nearby. Far off, maybe 15 paces away. Too far to be part of the moment, but it has scratches. You walk to it, kneel, clear frost. At first, it looks like just weathering. Then the pattern emerges. Lines, thin, broken, meandering like a child's drawing. But then you recognize it. It's a map, a clumsy one, abstract. But there's the spiral. There's the lone tree. There's the basin where the matriarch lay. And here's the small mark that must be this place. And beside it, a swirl, a spiral within a spiral. That's when your body starts understanding something your brain hasn't caught up to. This isn't a trail. It's a ritual. Here's your odd fact. Some Neolithic burial sites in northern Eurasia contain stones etched with looping non-linear paths, once dismissed as artistic doodles, but now reconsidered as mnemonic devices. Not meant for navigation, meant for recitation, like walking a prayer. The spiral in the stone isn't a path. It's a story order. This calf's rest, her place in the memory, wasn't an accident. She's part of a pattern, a performance, a long, slow retelling where each point is revisited only after the bones remember enough to move. You glance back one more time. She's still there, not buried, not forgotten, just sleeping. And suddenly, you can't remember why you were ever surprised. Of course they mourned their young. Of course they circled. Of course they left signs. You turn and for the first time since this began, the rib back at the shelter hasn't moved. Because this time you already knew where to go. Because this time you moved first. There's a silence you hear only after enough time with bones. Not an absence of sound, but a presence of stillness, like something breathing beneath the hush. You walk through it now, moving northwest without prompting. The rib still hasn't turned. Maybe it's resting. Maybe it knows you've started remembering without needing to be nudged. The landscape flattens again, coated in snow that looks untouched, but somehow walked upon. You see no prints yet. You feel them like pressure left behind by memory. You follow a shallow ridge until you find it a half circle of rocks, each the size of your palm, arranged in a way that would look accidental to anyone in a hurry. But you're not in a hurry. You kneel. The rocks aren't just gathered, they're placed. Tight at one end, looser at the other, and in the very center lies a flute, or something shaped like one. It's bone. Pale and worn, the size of a drinking straw, but thicker. Femur, maybe. From a juvenile mammoth or another large mammal. You lift it gently. Your fingers instinctively find the notches. 6 holes. But only 4 are real. The others are carved wrong, too shallow, unevenly spaced. Some just scratches pretending to be holes. The wind moves through the hollow and makes no sound. You lift it to your lips, pause, then blow. A dead note. Nothing. Then another breath, softer. Still nothing. Not even a whisper. It's not an instrument. It's a reminder. You turn it slowly. There are markings, simple ones. Etched swirls, some dots, one repeated zigzag near the base. Not language, not decorative, more like counting or mourning. A historical fact for your chilled fingertips. Several prehistoric flutes have been found across Europe and Siberia, carved from vulture bones, mammoth tusks, and reindeer antlers. Some are playable. Others appear deliberately broken with holes, misaligned, or filled with resin. Historians still debate whether these were functional instruments or symbolic ones meant to be held, not played. This one feels like the latter. You bring it to your lips one last time. Blow gently. Still nothing. But your chest vibrates, not with sound, but with memory. You imagine the hands that carved it. Maybe human, maybe not. A being trying to shape absence into something they could hold, trying to give weight to something that had vanished. You sit back, placing the flute gently in the circle again. You look around. No other bones, no tools, no artifacts. Just stones, snow, and a hush so full it's nearly deafening. Your odd fact for the night: in some modern elephant populations, calves have been observed mimicking adult sounds by blowing through trunks and manipulating wind. It's not exactly music. It's more like emotional play. The line between communication and performance blurred. You lean back on your elbows, eyes half-lidded. You can almost hear it, the ghost of a note. Maybe imagined. Maybe not. Something low and spiraling, rising from a flute carved from the memory of what never got said. Because that's the real weight of grief, right? It's not just loss. It's unfinished sentences. You glance again at the flute. Whoever carved this wasn't trying to speak to the living. They were trying to speak to what was lost. Maybe the holes weren't meant to make music. Maybe they were mouths for memory to breathe through, or for silence to wear like a disguise. You look up. The sky is gone flat again, silver and crushed like an old coin. Light presses against you without warmth. You rise slowly. Stretch your back. Leave the flute exactly where it was. No one should walk away with something like that in their pocket. As you step away, the wind picks up again. Not loud, not cold. just present. And there's something in it, not words, but something nearly word-shaped. A pull in your chest, a nudge in your steps. You don't need the rib to move anymore, not right now, because whatever comes next, you're already walking toward it. You're not sure how long you've been walking. The horizon hasn't shifted much, but your legs ache with the confidence of someone who's left a few miles behind. The flute circle fades from memory the way dreams do, blurred at the edges, sharp in the middle, and oddly sticky in your chest. The land dips suddenly, and you descend into it like a breath being held. The cold feels different here, not biting, just still, heavy, as if even the air is trying to remember something without disturbing it. You step over a narrow crease in the earth. Then you hear it. Crack! Not sharp, not fresh, a deep old crack, like the spine of the world realigning itself with a tired sigh. You freeze. There's no echo, no aftershock, just a presence. And then, nothing. You keep moving, more slowly now. The crack becomes visible a few paces on a long, jagged seam in the earth, running straight and silent through the snow. It's maybe a foot wide, but unfathomably deep. Like someone unzipped the permafrost just enough to warn you. The snow falls differently along its edges, like it's reluctant to cover something so purposeful. You step up to the rim, peer down, nothing but darkness, and silence so dense it buzzes. Here's a historical fact to place gently beside your nerves. Scientists have documented ancient ice wedges across the Arctic, cracks in the ground that formed during freeze-thaw cycles over tens of thousands of years. Some were caused by mammoth herds trampling soft earth over centuries, compacting it into fissures. Others, no clear explanation. Historians still debate whether some of these lines are natural or ritualistic remnants from Ice Age behaviors we never truly understood. You toss a pebble in, no sound, no bottom. The air coming from the crack is warmer than it should be. Not hot, just alive. And it smells faintly of copper ash and wet fur. Not your usual tundra bouquet. You walk along the fissure. It winds gently, not randomly, but deliberately, like it's been following you for a while and just now decided to show up. Then on the far side, you see something unexpected. Charcoal, blackened earth, a small ring of stones, a hearth, or what was almost a hearth. You approach. The stones are darkened but cold. No wood, no ash pile, just a faint trace of soot and a few broken twigs scattered nearby. You kneel and sniff the earth. A ghost of fire clings to the soil, but there's no central burn mark. No sign it was ever lit, just prepared, then abandoned. You sit on your heels thinking of what could have made someone or something build a fire and then walk away without lighting it. Fear, respect, a mistake. Or maybe the fire wasn't for warmth. Maybe it was meant to signal something or someone. You scan the area. Scratches mark the stones, not natural ones. Not decorative, just hurried, hesitant. A few diagonal gouges. One that almost looks like a handprint if you squint. You exhale and let the wind carry the question away. Your odd fact mammoth ivory burns surprisingly well when dry. Some Paleolithic groups used it as kindling in wind shelters, claiming it held heat in its memory. Of course, scientists would call that nonsense. But one researcher swore that mammoth ivory flames always burned blue, even when the rest of the fire did not. You touch one of the hearthstones. It's cracked split neatly down the middle. From heat or something older, you glance back at the fissure. It's still there, silent, gaping. You imagine a mammoth standing beside it, listening, waiting, not for escape, but maybe for permission, some kind of exchange. Fire for silence, smoke for safety. You shake your head. Too much mythology, not enough caffeine. Still, you don't try to light anything. Some fires are invitations. Some are insults, and some were never meant to be started again. You rise. The ground feels thinner under your boots now. The crack runs right beneath you. You can almost hear it hum, like a frozen muscle twitching in its sleep. You step carefully back from the edge, and then you notice it. The bones are gone. You spin around half panicked. No rib ring, no scattered vertebrae, nothing. But your pocket feels heavier. You reach in. The tusk shard, the spiral scratched bone, Still with you, still warm. The bones aren't following you anymore. They've moved inside. Whatever story they were telling, you're not just hearing it now. You're carrying it. You don't trust the warmth at first. It creeps in, soft, strange, and localized just your right side from the elbow to the ribs. It's not the sun, not the wind, just there. You stop walking, turn slowly, and see it. A rib, not upright, not part of a circle, just one. Resting half submerged in the snow, sticking out like a canoe paddle forgotten mid-voyage. And next to it, something almost stranger, a smell. You kneel. Press a gloved hand into the snow near the bone. The scent hits you full now, faint but sharp. Grassy, almost medicinal. You lean down closer, inhale. Herbs, not just any vegetation. It smells like crushed sedge, dry lavender, and something mint adjacent but colder. Not native, not modern, just ancient. Like a recipe that forgot its origin. You brush the snow away with care. Nestled along the underside of the rib are thin plant fragments. Pale green and gray preserved by frost and patience. Tucked into the curve like bedding. No roots, no stalks, just soft remnants clinging like memory to ivory. Your breath catches, because you've seen this before, well, read about it. Here's your historical fact. Scientists analyzing mammoth bones have found residues of long-extinct sedge species near certain rib fossils species with anti-inflammatory properties. The theory mammoths may have used plants not just for food, but for bedding or even pain relief. Historians still debate whether this was instinct or learned behavior. Was it random comfort or prehistoric medicine? You lean in nostrils flaring like a mammoth's might have. It's absurd, but you do it anyway. The scent is strongest in the groove of the rib, and beside it, half covered in moss-flecked frost, is something even stranger. A small cluster of stones, arranged in a line, and between them strands of fur. You freeze. The fur is fine, dark, and curled slightly. Not human, not recent. You pluck one out gently. It disintegrates almost instantly, but the imprint remains. Someone or something laid herbs and fur into this space with care. Not scattered, not dropped, placed. You look up from the rib and scan the area. More stones. Subtle. Half swallowed by snow, but clearly part of something circular. Not the massive rings from earlier. This one is smaller, closer, tighter. Like a cradle. Or a grave. You step inside it without thinking. The wind stills. The cold lessens. It's like entering breath. Not yours. The world goes quiet, really quiet, and you hear your own blood again. It sounds tired. You kneel in the middle of the circle. You don't dig. You don't need to. You feel what's underneath. Not bones, not fossils, just presence. Your odd fact for the evening elephants have been known to revisit the resting places of their dead, even years later. They pick up bones with their trunks, carry tusks, touch skulls. Sometimes they even scatter herbs or branches, not as tools, but as rituals. Some observers call this mourning. Others hesitate to use the word, but the behavior repeats. You rest your hand against the earth. Let the cold seep in. Then slowly, without knowing why, you begin placing things. The tusk shard from your pocket. The spiral scratched bone. One of your gloves. Not as offerings, just as weight. Memory needs anchoring. The scent remains strong, stronger than it should. And then the wind brings something new. A pulse of heat, faint, not rising from the ground, falling from the air. You glance up. No clouds, no light source, just sky. But the warmth lands on your cheek like breath. You whisper, "I see you." Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for the bones to know they were heard. You step back out of the circle. Collect your glove. Leave the rest. Some stories need to stay grounded. You begin walking again. Not because the rib moved, but because you're beginning to understand what the ribs are pointing to. Not a direction, not even a place. They're pointing to moments, echoes of decisions, whispers of where grief was made visible. You don't look back, but you smell the herbs for another mile. The next place finds you. You don't see it coming. No rib points this time, no spiral. Just the sudden feeling that your boots are no longer on snow, but something quieter, something burnt. You stop. The crunch is gone. Now it's a muffle like walking across soaked ash. You look down. Charcoal. Tiny brittle flakes pressed into the ground. You crouch, brush aside a thin crust of snow, and find blackened wood. Ancient, powdery, arranged in a faint ring no bigger than a kitchen table. A hearth. Not surprising, until you notice the kindling. Still there. Unburnt. Still stacked neatly in a crosshatch pattern. Still tucked with slivers of bark and dry moss. Still waiting. Someone built this fire, then changed their mind. You whisper, "Why?" And the earth naturally doesn't answer. You pick up one twig, sniff it. It smells like age. Nothing floral, just old wood and lichen that forgot it used to be green. You place it back exactly where it was. Because here's the unsettling part. The kindling looks fresh. Not new, not living, but untouched. No signs of animal disturbance. No moss growth, just patient, silent waiting. Here's your historical fact to warm your suspicion in several Paleolithic sites. Archaeologists have found hearths surrounded by deliberately arranged kindling that was never burned. Some believe these were abandoned shelters. Others suspect the fires were ritualistic symbolic acts left incomplete by design. Historians still debate whether these unlit hearths were warnings, dedications, or unspoken prayers. You walk a slow circle around the fire. There are footprints, not many, just one set, deep, human-sized. They approach the hearth, then stop, face away, and never return. You follow them for 10 steps until they vanish, just vanish. Snow has preserved so much else, but here it's like the person stepped out of the landscape, or was taken back into it. You return to the fire, and then you see the scratch marks on a stone, claw-shaped, not human. You crouch again. The gouges are sharp, deliberate. No attempt to hide them. 4 slashes, uneven. As if something large placed a paw or a foot onto the stone and pressed down, not in violence, just presence. A mammoth. It's absurd, but only if you haven't been paying attention for the last 10 sections. Your odd fact tonight. Cave paintings in Rouffignac, France, depict mammoths with deliberate abstract scratch marks across their bodies, added after the initial paintings were complete. Some scholars argue these were updates. Others think they were part of ritual refreshing ceremonies meant to keep the spirit of the mammoth from fading. You lean closer. The slashes are not just random. They're laid in parallel, and they all angle away from the unburnt fire. You glance back at the kindling, then the tracks, then the claw mark. You start to build a theory. Something approached this hearth. Something left its mark. And then, no one ever lit it. Maybe that was the point. Maybe the fire wasn't meant to burn. Maybe it was meant to promise. A kind of frozen contract between two beings that met here once briefly and agreed not to change the shape of things. You sit for a moment in the hearth ring. You don't feel alone, but you don't feel watched either. Just remembered. You close your eyes. No hum from the bones. No scent of herbs. Just the sound of your own breath and the faint warmth that isn't yours. You whisper, "I won't light it either." And the wind picks up soft and fast like a nod. You rise. 1 step away from the fire. 2 steps. You don't look back until you're 30 paces out, and by then, it's already gone, swallowed by snow, as if it was never meant to stay visible for long, as if fire when unlit remembers faster than flame. It takes a while to notice. You've been walking again through a gentle slope littered with dry snow, the kind that crunches underfoot like old parchment. The wind has quieted. The world feels paused. And then you see it. A footprint. Just one. Pressed shallow into a patch of icy crust where even the snow seems afraid to fall. You step closer. It's human. Bootless. Naked toes. 5 of them spaced apart like someone was walking calmly, not running. The foot sank slightly as the heel rose toward the toe. Not a frozen stumble, just a walk. Mid-step. But here's the strange part, it's facing away. Away from nothing. Just outward. as if whoever made it had stood at the center of something, then turned and left. You glance around. There are no other prints, none leading to or from it. Just the one alone fossilized mid-motion like a breath that got distracted and never returned. You walk a slow circle around it. Try to guess the direction it's pointing. Then you spot it. 20 paces away, the faintest curve in the ground. A familiar shape now. You recognize it before you admit it. Another bone circle, but smaller, tighter, and broken. A few ribs, one tusk fragment, a scattering of vertebrae, all half-sunken and crusted with wind-etched snow. You approach the center, no bones there, just silence. And that single footprint still pointing away. Here's your historical fact to pin to the chill in several mammoth bone dwellings found across Ukraine and Siberia. Archaeologists have documented solitary human footprints preserved within the structures, often at odd angles, sometimes facing outward. Historians still debate whether these were intentional placements, accidental moments, or ritualistic farewells. You kneel beside the footprint. Lean your hand near it, not over it. The air here feels reluctant, not haunted, just private, like you've interrupted something you shouldn't see unless you were also part of it. You whisper, "Was it goodbye?" The wind doesn't answer, but the bones behind you creak. You turn, not in panic, more like guilt. You're not alone. Well, you are, but also you aren't. Because here's what you feel in your chest now. Someone walked away from this place, not with fear, but with decision. One footprint, mid-step, and a circle left behind. A story maybe that didn't need to be finished, just left visible. Your odd fact for the hour: in Tibetan sky burial traditions, the body is offered to the elements, and footprints leading away from the site are sometimes made by monks, symbolizing the soul's release. The prints are not the deceased's, but a promise, a metaphor made literal. You stand again, brush snow gently back over the footmark, not to erase it, just to give it a little rest. You look at the broken circle. Some bones still lean inward, some lie flat, but all of them face the center except one. A cracked rib twisted awkwardly points not away from the circle, but toward the footprint, like it was watching someone leave, or maybe more hauntingly asking to follow. You take one last look. The sky above this place is dull and wide. Nothing dramatic, just enough light to make the snow remember it was once water. You turn and walk the same direction the footprint faces. You don't ask why. You already know the answer. You hum without meaning to. It slips out low, aimless, almost a sighs with an accidental melody. The kind of sound you make when your thoughts have wandered too far ahead and your mouth tries to call them back. And that's when you hear it. The bones shift. Back at the shelter. Possibly. Or maybe not. The sound's not directional. It's atmospheric. Like the ground itself exhaled through a ribcage older than time. You pause mid-step. Hum again. The vibration answers, not strong, not theatrical, just the faintest tremble in the snow near your boots, like sound is being remembered by the ground. You crouch and place your hand flat on the surface. Still. Then a second hum, this time from your chest instead of your throat. And there it is. The bones shift again. They're not far. A line of ribs, half buried in snow and moss, lies scattered nearby. Not arranged, not organized, just resting. But one of them, a longer, flatter one, quivers when you hum. You get closer. Crouch. Place a hand gently on its surface. It's cold, of course, but not dead. You hum again, this time intentionally. And this time it responds. A tiny vibration. Enough to feel in your palm but not see. Like a whisper you don't hear with your ears but with your spine. You glance at the other bones. Most are quiet, but a second one trembles. Then a third. You change pitch. Some stop. Others begin. You're not imagining this. Here's your historical fact. Mammoth bones, particularly ribs and tusks, are dense and hollowed in ways that can carry and respond to sound waves, particularly low-frequency ones. Some experimental archaeologists have theorized that Ice Age humans may have discovered this by accident and used the bones in drumming or acoustic rituals. Historians still debate whether these were actual instruments or just part of natural soundscapes observed and interpreted over generations. You try a longer hum. The ground beneath you doesn't shake, but your fingertips do, from the bones. They're tuned somehow not to music, but to frequency, to presence. You stop humming. The silence feels like an interruption, so you whisper instead. A simple line, "Can you still hear me?" No answer. But the bone beneath your hand warms slightly, not by temperature, but by intention, as if something is leaning closer, listening harder. You wonder how long it's been since someone tried this. You wonder if the bones forgot they could be listened to, or if they've been waiting to be heard in the right key. Here's your odd fact in caves with prehistoric art. Some paintings are located at acoustically resonant points where echoes, our sharpest hums, last longest. It's been suggested these were not chosen for light or shelter, but for sound. A collaboration between art and echo. You run your hand along the bone's surface. There are shallow grooves, not decorative, but intentional. Like a finger dragged slowly across it while singing, or crying, or both. You take a breath and hum again, this time in a rising tone. 4 bones vibrate, not just shift, vibrate. You stand slowly. Look around. This isn't just a scatter of ancient bones. This is an arrangement, not a song, not a message, but a conversation partner. And here you are, humming into the past, waiting to see if the past hums back. You take a few steps back. The sound dies. Everything stills. You hum again, same pitch, softer. Only one rib responds. You walk to it. Place your hand gently. It's trembling. Not much, but enough. You don't say anything this time. You just listen, and that's when you hear it. A hum that isn't yours. Low, faint, not vocal, not mechanical. A resonance rising from the snow like a memory lifting itself out of bed. You whisper, "I hear you." The vibration steadies, then fades. Not ends, fades. Like it's stepping back. Like it knows you understand now. You stand. Shake the snow from your coat. And as you leave, the bones behind, one last note flutters through your body, not from your mouth. From your ribs. You hum it once more, quiet, brief. The bones stay still, which is how you know they're listening. You return to the shelter at last. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because something soft has settled in your chest. A finality, or the closest thing bones ever offer to one. The rib circle hasn't moved, not even a shiver. They lie quiet now, arranged exactly as you left them, like teeth inside the jaw of a long, closed story. Snow has dusted the edges, smoothing them into suggestion more than form. You step into the circle, and the wind stops completely. No rustle, no whisper, just you, and the bones, and the rhythm beneath your feet that may or may not be memory walking with you. You lie down, right at the center where the others might have circled once. Where mammoths stood over their young. Where ancient people whispered farewells too quiet for words. Where footprints faced away and flutes were carved wrong on purpose. The cold is softer here, the kind that hums at the edges of sleep, not the kind that bites. Your breath slows, chest rising with the rhythm of something older than lungs, bones pressing gently against the earth like they're trying to remember how to rest. Above you, the sky is wide, pale, blank, a page no one's written on in a very long time. You close your eyes and feel the story circling, not ending, just looping, because that's what bones do. They don't finish. They repeat. They echo the shape of what came before. Whisper it to the next. Hold the silence for as long as it takes for someone to notice. And now it's you. You're lying at the center of something no one built, only remembered. And it only ends when you fall asleep. So fall asleep. Let the spiral close softly around your breath. Let the ribs go quiet. Let the earth lean close. Let the bones carry the story now. Let them whisper the rest. So that's the story, at least, the part we could hear before sleep stole us away. You walked across a frozen world held together not by fire or shelter or maps, but by memory. Memory etched in bone and spirals, in footsteps that faced the wrong direction. You followed a path shaped by grief that never asked to be understood, only heard. From a nursery pressed into the tundra to a rib that vibrated like a cello string when you hummed to a flute that refused to sing because its only music was the silence of what was lost. The bones didn't guide you to a single truth. They guided you to moments, to gestures, to unlit fires and sedge-scented ribs and a single footprint mid-step that said more than any monument ever could. You weren't just a listener, you became part of the ritual, another set of footprints, another pause in the cold. And when the bones finally stopped moving, it wasn't because the story had ended, it was because it had passed to you. So let it rest with you now. Let the spiral continue in your breath, in your thoughts, in the way you listen to the ground the next time it creaks. Because stories like this never really end. They just sleep a little until someone hums. And the bones remember. Good night.